All right.
Hello.
Is that how you start? All right.
All right.
All right, mate.
All right.
Hello, you are listening to Off Radar with me, James Smith.
Me, Neil Brock.
And me, James Eatock.
It's a movie podcast.
We can do characters that fly and shoot laser beams and do woo.
Beneath all of that, it's all about friendship.
Playing the drums until his hands are bleeding.
Each week, one of us picks a movie that all three of us either haven't seen in many years or in some cases haven't seen at all.
We each head off and watch the chosen movie, return to the microphone, then waffle about it for your listening pleasure.
Furthermore, if you want to join in and suggest a movie for us to watch, why not tweet us at Off Radar Podcast or email us on offradarpod@gmail.com.
If you like what you hear, please subscribe, share, and review. It really helps getting the pod out there. For now, strap in, turn the volume up, and let's go Off Radar.
I think you need to turn off Eatock's camera already.
Hello, guys, and welcome back to part 3 on Off Radar of this very special Halloween podcast episode. I'm James Smith. I'm joined by Neil Brock.
Hello.
Nige. And he's done is that a zombie voice?
I don't know.
Sounds like
Maybe I just need a strap
sounds
saw.
like the Cookie Monster.
That is terrifying. Thank you very much. Hello.
And we've also got James Eatock here.
hello.
He always follows that up.
I was tempted to do Grover, but I thought no.
And today's episode, we are talking about a film that Nige picked called Train to Busan, which I forgot to write down. When did it come out? Do you know?
I can tell you when it came out. Of course I can. It was 2016, so it's a modern one for this pod.
2016,
So,
a Korean
yeah.
film, and I had not seen it. I don't think I'd heard of it. Eatock?
No.
Oh, see, I'm always throwing you a curveball, a film that perhaps, well, again, because it's quite recent as well, there's less chance to have seen it over the years. But yeah, when it came out, it was like really well received and recommended, and I got to go and see it at the cinema with my lovely wife. But yeah, it's a good opportunity to watch a good old-fashioned zombie film in some respects.
부산으로 가는 KTX 406 열차가 곧 출발합니다.
저기요, 이상한 사람이 하나 타고 있는 것 같은데.
I've always been a huge fan of zombie films, and I know that zombie films sort of really came into fashion probably about 10-15 years ago. All sorts of TV shows and films. You had things like The Walking Dead becoming absolutely huge. But when you go back to sort of the origins of zombie films, you've got the George A. Romero classics, you've got Night of the Living Dead, you've got Dawn of the Dead, and there's a bunch of other of the Deads that he did as well. And then when you got into the 80s, there was a bit more of like a cartoony comedy feeling with Return of the Living Dead, which were a lot more sort of comedy based and ridiculous. And then when Dawn of the Dead had its remake, I probably think in the early noughties, that really kind of kick-started the genre again. And you had all different sorts. You had like the comedy ones like Zombieland. You had like, there was a romance one with a guy who I think was in Skins, was in this like random comedy love story
that.
one.
Yeah.
And it was pretty good as well.
Yeah.
And there was like really like cheap ones. There's one called like Dance of the Dead. Loads and loads of zombie films coming along, zombie TV shows, people wearing zombie t-shirts, loads of memorabilia, places like Planet Hollywood packed to the gills with all this zombie stuff. And then lo and behold, when you think it's just been oversaturated beyond recognition, and I also should have mentioned Shaun of the Dead as well, which is another absolutely fantastic zombie film. But yeah, when you think it's just gone beyond the point, no more, please, no more zombie films. I heard about Train to Busan, and I thought, you know what? It's supposed to be really good. It's probably not going to be anything new. It's probably not going to be much to it, but I'll check it out, see how good it is. And to be honest, it does have all the sort of classic zombie stereotypes. It is sort of a little bit by the numbers in some regard, but it's a zombie film, and it's high octane, it's high paced, there's lots of very interesting characters, and there's a real depth and emotion to this film that you probably don't get, certainly with like some of the big blockbusters like World War Z that came out sort of around this time. What Train to Busan does, and sometimes when watching a foreign film, for me personally, sometimes you find it slightly harder to connect because you don't know the language, you're spending a lot of time reading subtitles, and this film is completely subtitled. But yet, there was just something about this film that really draws you in and really makes you feel attached to it, and you really care about the characters. There's a biotech plant and there's been a leak, and it's like, oh, wow, that old chestnut. And the kind of main protagonist is actually involved with this company. He's got a little daughter, but he's a workaholic, so she's had to break up with the mother. He only cares about himself. He only cares about business. He even buys her like a birthday present, like, oh, I'll buy you a weed. She's like, I've already got one, which you kind of bought me before. And it's like, this guy's a bit of a jerk. And because it's this girl's birthday, she really wants to go and see her mum, who lives sort of on the other side of sort of Korea. So that he's like, well, to make it up to her, I've kind of missed her like recital where she panicked with nerves and messed everything up. I've given her a rubbish birthday. I'm going to take her to see her mum on the train. So gets on the train, and lo and behold, this kind of zombie outbreak's going on around them, but everyone on the train has no idea what's going on.
팀장님?
Just as the train's about to pull away, some woman runs past the guard and kind of clambers onto the train. Train pulls away, little girl's looking out the window, like this guard gets like attacked and munched by a zombie, and you think, oh right, it's going to be one of those kind of films. There's going to be a lot of people getting jumped on and munched. And from that point on, there's, as I said, this kind of emotional story, but also kind of this like social story of like the class barriers and the things that people kind of deal with. And we discussed it quite a bit in part one of the Halloween podcast, in like They Live, and kind of the political and the social, and people kind of being trodden on, and that divide between the haves and the people that want. And I think this film makes a really good sort of display of that. In terms of how the film unfolds.
I was going to say the biggest villain in this film, the businessman.
Oh yeah,
right?
What a horrible guy.
What
Just
a scumbag he is.
Yeah,
well.
he
It's
is. But that just speaks to your point about the whole classes. He is. At first, you just think, oh, he's a bit scared, so yeah, I can understand that he fears for his life. And then it's just like, oh no, he's a monster. He literally throws at least 3 people to their death and probably more, and gets everyone in trouble, because when he jumps from train to train in the train yard scene, people are just getting eaten left, right, and centre, and it's all because he just cannot close the door behind him when he's running.
He just doesn't care about anything except himself.
And obviously that reflects on the main character's journey, which is fantastic, I think, in this movie. It's so well done. It's like, yeah, we can see he's the selfish dad and he's the guy on this journey. But like you say, I am someone that, watches a subtitled film and goes, oh, okay, I watched it. Somehow this film grabbed me emotionally, and was so, at times I found myself in tears, because that child actor, dear God. Dear God.
So good. It's unreal.
How do you be that good at that age where you're just shedding real tears and looking like... It's really almost hard. It's almost like emotional to talk about, because she's such a good actor. The emotion is so real, so raw.
부산 엄마한테 가고 싶어요. 네.
And her with the father, and again, the father's journey. But what I love in that whole setup, as you talk about in the kind of opening scenes, is you can see where they're going, where you start seeing the passengers go on the train, these are the ones who are going to be characters in this movie. I know it sounds terrible and it's very ignorant of me, but I don't remember people's names in this movie.
No, not at all.
So I'm going to
categorize them, can't you?
Dad, the son.
Really good for us to do it. So,
but the big dude and his wife who's pregnant. The big dude is great. I've seen him in loads of films before, like Western films, as in American films and stuff like that. He's done other films.
As you say, it's about these characters, isn't it? And it's about, you've got the baseball team that are travelling, and you've got the kind of shy guy and the girl, the cheerleader who really fancies him. You've got, as you said, the guy and his pregnant wife, and he's really strong, and he actually calls the main sort of protagonist the dad. He's like, oh, you're an arsehole, and they discuss about him being like a fund manager, and even the little girl's like, yeah, we all know fund managers are
he says,
arseholes.
you're like, oh, so your father's a bloodsucker or something, and she says something like, And the pregnant mother goes, "Don't say that in front of the child." The child's like, "Yeah, don't worry, we're all thinking it."
Yeah, exactly. It's just such a brilliant little line. But and then there's like a homeless guy on the train as well, which really sort of strikes the divide between the haves and the have-not. As I said, there's the baseball team. There's a couple of sisters, old lady sisters as well, and then there's the business guy, there's the train conductor as well, and then there's a few people who are kind of like just kind of doing their job. So there's the sort of ticket guy who's actually on the train as well, it's interesting because you don't think there's almost enough time to make these characters mean anything. And that's the thing in zombie films.
No.
Quite often people come into a film, and in horror films in general, they're cannon fodder. We know what's going to happen as soon as they come into the film. You're not going to have that much of that much connection to them. And as you said, it's like it's on us that we can't really remember their names. Like Korean names can be quite difficult to describe sometimes, and you're so close to these people in terms of seeing them on the screen and being like, wow, I actually really do care what's going to happen. I think
that's is so true. That first, even before they get on the train, the first 15 minutes, if you didn't know this was a zombie film, I probably wouldn't have guessed, because it starts with tension, with silence, but it's all very normal. It's in a car park, and the conversations are very real. He's a hardworking dad. But then when they get on the train, like, what's really interesting with what they've done with these characters is they've given this little girl like almost what she needs on this journey, and the pregnant woman is almost like the mum that she hasn't got right now. You've got the granny who is on the train that is like her granny. Her real dad is, it's his journey of becoming a better man. We've talked about it in Scrooged, in Groundhog Day. It's a good technique, but it's done incredibly well in, like you say, a film where so many of these zombie films in the past have been very one-layered. Like World War Z, like you mentioned, is a perfect example, right? It's a fun, enjoyable film, but that's all. With this, it goes to another level, and that's all in those little people moments that are created very early on. You've got a connection with each and every one of them, even if the connection's not a good one. Like Ito, you mentioned the businessman, like his connection's so important, because often in a horror film or a zombie film, we're led to believe the baddies are the demons of evil. In this, he's almost worse than them, because they have control. They're the undead. With him, he is an evil person that is only thinking of himself, and you want him to die, but all of the like some of the good people, unfortunately do die.
There's a really interesting scene probably about halfway through the film where obviously whilst they're on the train, they discover that this kind of like zombie apocalypse is upon them, and they're trying to get somewhere safe, and they get communicated to go to a specific station where the army are present. It's like, again, this is like classic zombie film setup. The army are present, they've sorted everything out, you'll be able to get off the train. So everyone slowly gets off the train, and at this point kind of half the train's been overrun by zombies, but they really struggle to get through doors because obviously they're zombies, they don't know how to open a door. If they can't see you, they don't attack you.
One interesting thing, they've flipped the whole like dark night thing. With horror movies, normally you're safe in the daylight, whereas with this one you're safe in the dark, which I thought was really clever and unexpected.
Oh, the tunnel scenes are amazing when they've got to get through the hordes of like 3 or 4 carriages, and they're like, right, we figured out that when they're going through a tunnel, we can't see, so we've got to try and figure out how to bypass them. And there's all these wonderful ways of doing it, and at some point they get everybody to like, right, let's go through a tunnel, we'll all crawl along the top of where you put the luggage, and just all these little nice touches. But yeah, I agree with both of you. The darkness was a lovely twist.
You end up with kind of all the people we've discussed are kind of separated on the train. So the guy's separated from his pregnant wife, the dad's separated from his daughter, and they need to figure out a way of getting through the train. And that scene, well, there's a few scenes there, as Etok said, they're absolutely fantastic. But when they eventually do, spoiler alert, make their way through the train and finally get back to their family, there's this huge divide of the people that are kind of safe and these people that, well, there's no way you could have got through all those kind of zombies without getting bit or attacked. So you've got to stay on the outside. And in the delay that happens, it takes them so long to actually, they have to literally fight their way almost through this door to get in. They eventually get in, and in doing so, the two older ladies, one of the sisters gets taken out by one of the zombies and killed. And the sister who's left behind
Oh, I love that.
is so outraged by kind of like how awful these people have been, how selfish they'd been, that she just opens the door and let the zombies come in.
고생 많았다 언니.
저도 야 서로 이제 막아.
Luckily, all the kind of main protagonists have sort of been isolated and almost quarantined. Quarantine being quite an interesting word. Obviously, we can't almost go a podcast without mentioning COVID, I'm afraid. But yeah, they're kind of safe. But again, the businessman, the scummy businessman, fights his way through by trampling on basically everyone else just to get out of it. And it's, again, it kind of shows that divide between like the people who are willing to do anything to get what they want compared to those who are just like show a bit of compassion. And the dad as well at the start of the film is almost saying to his daughter, don't be nice to people, you've really got to look out for yourself. And she's like, but why?
Well, he even says that to her on the train a couple of times. He says something
Yeah.
You know, oh no, it's when they're in the train station. There's that really tense scene, and he says to like, you know, he basically says like you got to think of yourself. And then the beautiful moment where he has that character realization is when he confronts the businessman and he pins him down, and he's like, what's he say to him? He goes, so that the father says to the daughter, I wrote the quote down, he goes, at a time like this, only watch out for yourself. And then when he confronts the businessman, he's like, why did you do this? Why did you, you know, and the obviously the businessman gets out of it by going, he's bitten, he's infected, and everybody goes, right, you get in the other carriage. And it's so wonderful you two made the World War Z comparison. I literally wrote World War Z, but with people you actually care about. Because that's it. You know, because I watched World War Z and I was fascinated by, the fast zombies that build up and rah, rah, rah. But it's like Brad Pitt's in it, and tell me who else is in it I'm supposed to care about. And it's like you don't remember anybody, and I don't even care for Brad Pitt's character in World War Z. In this film, like Nige said, it's just Brad Pitt. Yeah, it's Brad Pitt as Brad Pitt.
Yeah.
Whereas you go to, like Nige said, with all these characters, even in like the smallest moments, the two sisters, they're in like a handful of scenes, but you understand that relationship. So when she opens the door to let her zombie sister in and the army of evil kill everybody, you can partially understand why she's doing that as well. She's like, oh, I can't live without my sister, and I don't want to live with these fuckers who are so selfish. So do you know what? Have at it. And it's such a character-driven film. And the big dude, I bloody love him. He's so good. He's just like he beats the zombies up, and he's a big monster of a man. But he's the levity in the film. Like he brings some humour to it at times as well. There's one bit when it's the big wrestler. He's almost like a wrestler guy. The dad and the young baseball guy, and they're all in the toilet trying to figure out like, okay, what are we going to do? And it's just their scenes. It's almost like a cuteness to it. But
there's a bit with his mobile phone, isn't there, where it's like, your ringtone is terrible. And it's like, what do you mean? It's like, how do you change it? And it's like,
how do you change? That's it. And he starts laughing. But I was going to say the big dude's final battle with the zombie army is so good, where he's like, take my wife and look after her. And then he just he grabs one of the zombies and he just like he's holding the zombie against all these other zombies. And you can see, and even when he's starting to transform into a zombie, he's still desperately clinging to that last bit of humanity. He's like, and it's so wonderful.
Yeah, it's so clever. And all of that on a train. And, you know, like the claustrophobia, you know, if you're going to be in a zombie apocalypse, the last place I'd want to be is on a cramped train. And, you know, once again, we talked about fear and stuff. They're definitely playing into, you know, people's fear and emotions of being in confined spaces. The interesting thing is, before seeing this film, I thought, how are they going to string this out for a whole film? You know, like being on a train.
Yeah,
but actually,
likewise.
they get off, and like you said, the army scene is, I think, one of the best scenes in the film. It's so tense. It's like some proper edge of the seat stuff. And like I said, you know, we start at the beginning with not very much music. It's all very real. It's very character driven, and then we get the polar opposite later on, where it's like big. It's almost like Hans Zimmer-esque. You know, it's kind of like like explosions, and some of the explosions, the CGI is not amazing, but but it doesn't matter.
Well, yeah, it's a lower budget film than perhaps a lot of the other kind of sort of horror films have released around that kind of time, I suppose. But yeah, they've really made the most of it. And I think a lot of that comes with the convincing performances. A lot of it comes from the zombies. Like you mentioned, like the fast zombies. Now, if you're a zombie purist, all zombies should be slow and like ooh, that sort of classic style. But I think after 28 Days Later was kind of one of the first where it was like, you know what, we're going to have them going really quick. And I can't remember if it was that or another film that basically they only had fast zombies because they couldn't afford to have enough extras to make slow zombies seem menacing, which kind of makes sense. But in this, as you say, that kind of that claustrophobic feel combined with these fast zombies that are like leaping and jumping, and their bodies like they're almost like a bunch of contortionists. They stand up, and it's even that kind of movement's terrifying and kind of reminds you of those films like The Grudge and stuff like that in terms of bodies, and The Exorcist as well, moving in such a way that you don't think should be possible. And it sort of sends a shiver down your spine. But it's action. There's a lot going on. It's frenetic pace. It's action.
It's laced with. I was going to say it's action, but it's laced with such character work, which is nuts. It doesn't. It shouldn't make sense going into this movie. Like Smith, it's like how are they going to string out this whole train thing, and they do it. They because when they first leave that train at the station, I thought, well, okay, so now we're in this kind of movie. But it still works, you know. It's
almost
nuts.
2 hours long as well. It's not like it's a really quick popcorn film. There's depth to it, and there's a lot that happens throughout. So, I want to say one scene as well I thought was amazing, and again, it's part of the character's journey. The dad is when he has the phone call from his mother, and she's turning into a zombie on the phone. That's heartbreaking because he's like, man, she's like, take care of your daughter, you know, get her to her mother or whatever. And it's just, you can see him, and he's so good. He's not like, what's wrong with my mother? It's just, he's breaking inside. And it's, I think his performance as well. You know, everybody in this film is just so fucking good. It's almost like a film that's this, I'm going to say, small to some degree or not as well known. It doesn't have any right to be this good. It's so good. It's easy. Like I've seen a lot of zombie movies over the years, but this has to be easily one of the most thought out and grounded in character. I still can't process
absolutely
that.
It's like, I think the contrast of him becoming this sounds funny, him becoming more human is nice. You know, the overall message of the film, him being the best version of himself, not being selfish, you know, that underlying message of that contrasted with the zombies. I totally agree. For me, this was a real surprise. Like, I'm not a massive Korean cinema fan. I really enjoyed Parasite. Other than that, I've not seen a great deal. So when you said about this film, I was like, okay, let's give it a go. But yeah, it really surprised me. And I'd actually recommend people who are not necessarily into horror films give this a watch as well. Spoiler alert.
Can I just say one more scene I loved in this film? And it's beautifully done. Like when the dad is bitten, and you're like, oh God, no. And the dad is bitten by the businessman, and he tells his daughter, he's like, look, there's the break on the train. He says to the pregnant woman, because the survivors of this movie are, for a bit, the dad, the pregnant woman, and the daughter, and the businessman gets killed. And the dad's going to become a zombie. And he basically locks his daughter in and like tells her, like, I love you and everything. He locks the door and then rushes to the edge of the train. And he just stands on the edge of the train. And it's so beautifully done because as he's slowly morphing into a zombie, he has all these beautiful memories of his daughter as like a young baby. And it's all like, it's almost like through his eyes, his whole, it's getting cloudy and foggy as his memory, but his last thoughts are of his daughter and the memories they shared together. And also, like, after all the selfishness he's done in life, it's like the one thing that he loves more than anything, the one thing that he treasures, that he's going to miss to an extent, is his daughter. And then he just kind of throws himself from the train. It's so tragic, but so beautifully done. It's like it's the death of, you know, the main character, but But yeah, it's a beautiful scene. In a zombie movie, it's like, wow, this is a beautiful death in a zombie movie.
But that's the thing, like all 3 films we've talked about in our little Halloween special, characters do not have a great chance of making it to the end of the film.
No.
Let's be honest.
That's very true.
But I feel like this, compared to all the others, pulls the heartstrings the most.
I agree.
As we said, it was such a surprise that it would be capable of doing so.
Absolutely. And of all the genres as well, this is the one genre that it rarely does that, I think. You know, I think you get that more in maybe some kind of like psychological thrillers like The Exorcist or The Conjuring or something like that. But yeah, with this, it really kind of gets this genre and slaps it in the face and say, you know, this is how it could be done, and should be done. I think the only bad thing is there's talk of an American version being remade of it.
I did see that. Yeah,
oh man, really?
Not good news.
And that would be World War Z, won't it? On a train, basically.
Well, that would probably be how it's bloody marketed and even reviewed afterwards. But then hopefully what will happen is what happened with things like The Ring and all these other films where people go back. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, because when you get the opportunity to watch the original, if you see this horrible reboot, remake, whatever you want to call it, you can go back and watch the original and absolutely love it.
This was a real surprise for me, as I've said. Like, I like zombie films, I like horror films. I wasn't expecting a great deal, but I feel like this is potentially, big statement, one of the best zombie films I've seen, you know, in a long time. Character study was incredible. The journey they go on a train is amazing. The little girl is one of the best actors I've seen as a little girl in a film. The whole cast were awesome. The script, the shots, there's some beautiful cinematography. The music is stunning. It changes almost as much as the zombies. I'm going to give this an 8 out of 10. Etok.
Yeah, like you, I echo your entire review there, Smith. It was word for word. It's a surprise. When Nige said this, I was like, okay, and then I start watching. It's like, oh, zombies on a train, okay, and then it just continued to exceed my expectations. That's the best way to put it. So yeah, I like you, surprised by easily one of the best zombie movies I've seen, and it's not a genre that I particularly like, but definitely one of the best. It's got the most character work. I give it like a 7.5.
Great. Nige?
Well, Edgar Wright, who you may remember as director of Spaced, which had a very cool Resident Evil moment in it, and of course Shaun of the Dead, said himself on Twitter it's like the best zombie film he's seen in forever. Like, he absolutely loved it, and I loved it. I thought it was great. And I've actually looked at some of the cast names. So Gong Yu, who plays the dad in it, is brilliant. Mei Don Sook, who we said, I'm probably butchering the pronunciations, I apologise, who's like the strong guy, is brilliant. And Soo-Ann Kim, who plays the little girl, is absolutely wonderful. Really enjoyed it. I think it's a great cinema film. I would really recommend watching this on a big screen if you get the opportunity to do so. For me, it's an 8 out of 10, and it's one of the best zombie films. Certainly one of the best zombie films of the last 10 years, without doubt, and it deserves to be talked about in the same sort of breath of those films we mentioned earlier in terms of like Night of the Living Dead, Dawn of the Dead, and all those classics, and this is up there. So please check it out if you've not, and if you do obviously do the usual, get in touch via Twitter or via all those other wonderful ways. Smith, do you want to tell them all about the ways they can
I will
contact us?
indeed. So if you want to get in touch, it is in the description down below, but you can email us on offradarpod@gmail.com. You can tweet us at offradarpodcast. We're on Facebook, and let us know what your thoughts are on this, any of the Halloween films we've discussed, or any of the films we discussed so far, and we will give you a shout out next time.
Or anything you do over Halloween as well. Like, we want to know about how do you celebrate your Halloweens. We spoke about ours, like we watch films or we go out and egg houses or whatever we do for Halloween. What do you do? And what films have you watched? And are there any good TV shows as well about spooky things? I know there's like that American Horror Story that everyone raves about. So what else? And there's Stephen King based ones. What is there? We want to know.
There's obviously the Walking Dead one as well, but that's gone on for.
Man, I had to give up. That's a show that will never end.
Started well. Anyway, that's another podcast. Well, guys, that is it for our Halloween special. Let us know, like we've said, what you think of these 3 films or any of the films we've reviewed so far. And if you've got something for us to watch, send it in. We're getting a whole host on our list, so please keep doing that. Also, if you can, please review and share. It really, really does help us getting the pod out there, and we really appreciate it. Next week, we're going to be talking about First Blood with Sylvester Stallone. So go away, watch that, let us know what you think of it, and we'll speak to you next time on Off Radar.